What's happening? Happy hump day to you and yours. Thanks for joining us. As always, it is very much appreciated. Lot to get to, but don't forget, before we get into the content, give us that thumbs up on YouTube. Like this channel. That's the way we grow the community. So like, comment, and subscribe if you're hanging out. Like, comment, subscribe, rate, and review on Spotify and Apple Pods. Camp starts today. Mayo, by the way, said this morning that they will be in pads in 6 to 7 days. So we're still about a week away from pads being put on. The real stuff starts, but camp begins today. And obviously we are all excited about what this camp could end up being. Drake May, the young guys on the offense, all the draft picks, right? The defense coming back. So it's an exciting day. And hopefully there are people out there that are excited for this camp. I'll get into the offense in just a couple of minutes. But first, some news on Matthew Judon. Josina Anderson this morning, she ended up posting on Twitter, I'm told Patriots linebacker Matt Judon is currently planning to participate in practice while talks continue over his contract per source. Judon, who did report for camp, is in the final year of his current deal. Last season, Judon reportedly limited himself in training camp while awaiting a financial adjustment to his contractual terms at the time. So Matthew Judon expected to participate, expected to practice, and Gerard Mayo with the media earlier today said as much. And he said as much yesterday that he expects Judon and Godchaux, he expects Matthew Judon to not only be here in New England during this camp season, but be out there practicing. So this is obviously a positive step. And standing by his word from that ZLX interview is what Matthew Judon is doing. Don't forget, Judon told Rich Schertenlieb that he didn't like how last year went down. He wasn't proud of it, that Holden situation, right? He thought it was quote-unquote trash. And he made the point on ZLX with Schertenlieb and company that he was not going to do that same thing again this year. And that's precisely what he is doing right now, right? He is not doing what he did last year. He's standing by his words to Schertenlieb. He's here. He's at Gillette. He plans on practicing. He is going to participate. So he's not going to do what he did last season. He's not going to cause a distraction as far as not being on the field, not doing the work that his teammates are doing. So that's a fantastic sign. And it's professionalism by Judon. He's got a contract. He's going to be out there. He's going to practice. Now, will he play a game under this contract? That's still to be determined. There are lots of restructuring happening right now throughout the NFL. Lots of restructuring with the contracts. Yesterday, when I was on 98.5 The Sports Hub last night, we talked about it. And Matthew Stafford restructured his deal. Amari Cooper restructured his deal with Cleveland. So there are veterans that are restructuring their contracts, whether it's a 1-year deal, 2-year deal, 3-year deal. They're guaranteeing more money this year. So you see this across the league. I'm not surprised. And I think Judon is obviously speaking with the team. Mike Reese has reported as much. So Judon and the Patriots, they continue to have conversations. They continue to negotiate. It feels like something is going to be worked out. Now, whether or not it's going to be a 1-year thing, they just bump his pay this year and they move on next year, I don't know. But it feels like something will be worked out between Judon and the Patriots. They continue to talk. He's going to participate in these practices at camp. And it feels like they're going to work something out where he stays here at least for 2024. Maybe not. Maybe there's a pivot at some point and they realize they can't get something done. But it would seem to me to be pretty easy to bump Judon's pay this year, give him more guaranteed money. You have the most cap space left versus any other team in the NFL in this camp season. You got like $40 million left under the cap. So you can walk up to Judon and say, you know what? Let's just guarantee you X amount of dollars. Let's give you some incentives that you can easily attain this year. But overall, it does feel like Judon will be here in 2024. Whether or not he will include an extra year, he'll be back in 2025, I have no idea. Mayo also said that he expects Judon and Godchaux to practice today. There haven't been really any reports as far as Godchaux and, his status other than Godchaux coming out and letting people know that he was not happy with his contract situation via Twitter. There hasn't been a lot of reporting. So the Patriots, they're underway right now. Training camp day one. I've got Twitter up. I'll keep an eye on things. They're going through the stretches. Nothing is happening right now. I can tell you that Godchaux and Judon are both at practice, according to Phil Perry. They are both suited up, and they are currently stretching. So there you have it. Both guys out there stretching right now. I feel good about Judon being here. We'll see if Godchaux can make something happen as well with the team. But that's the latest on those two guys. All right, let's get into the offense. Training camp beginning today. We covered the defense on Monday. A lot of continuity defensively, the coaching staff, a lot of continuity on the field defensively with this football team this year. Offense is a completely different story, right? When you look offensively, there's so many changes on the field, off the field. The scheme has changed. The verbiage has changed. So many changes on the offensive side. So what we're going to do, much like we did on Monday, we're going to look at the position groups. We're going to talk about the position groups. We're going to break those down, the competitions at camp this year, and then we will move on to some bigger overarching questions. Start with quarterback, because quarterback is the number one story at this camp. We can talk about Jerod Mayo. We can question Jerod Mayo as a head coach, first time. What's he going to look like? What's he going to do? How's he going to approach this? But the number one story in camp is the quarterback battle. It's the quarterback competition between Jacoby Brissett and Drake May. And right now, I'm leaning Brissett starting this season as QB1. And I lean Brissett because he has the experience. He has the experience within this scheme. You go back to 2022, what he did with Alex Van Pelt and the Cleveland Browns. He proved that he could be a good quarterback. When you look at Brissett's last 16 games as a starter, last 30 games, and I think it's 16 starts, he's been pretty damn good this year. I mean, over his career. And so when you look at Brissett versus May, I would lean Brissett. That communication factor, the knowledge within the system, the comfort with Alex Van Pelt. Brissett knows exactly what he's supposed to do and how he is supposed to do it with this offense. Drake May, as we all know, he might get thrown in the deep end here. He's learning a whole lot of new. So I lean Brissett with that experience and with his knowledge of the system and the scheme. I think it's more likely than not Brissett is starting week 1. It's not to say May can't start. Of course May can start. But May would have to leapfrog Brissett. And I think for May to do that, he has to show dramatic improvement. You know, you look from week to week, he has to show that he's taking more steps and he's chasing Brissett down. And for him to leapfrog Brissett, he has to crush it. He has to crush this camp. And Mayo said as much yesterday when he met with the media, right? He said he's got to light it up. And so May has to be great in this camp to overtake Brissett. I think the Patriots, they're going to be a little bit more conservative with May than people think. They're not going to rush him out there. They're going to wait to see if he has the goods to leapfrog Brissett. And if he does, then they'll have that conversation. But Mayo said yesterday that coming out of spring, clearly Brissett was the guy. And he said that for a reason. And he said that May would have to light things up to be QB1 for a reason. Drake May is going to have to ball out this training camp. He's going to have to show up to that joint practice against the Eagles and play great football. He's going to have to play really good football in the preseason. He's going to have to force the hand of this coaching staff to say, you know what, we're going to go with the rookie. He's going to play great football to overtake Brissett. So I lean Brissett right now. And I want all of you to think about this one question as we talk about the quarterback competition over the next several weeks. What's the worst that can happen if you start Jacoby Brissett week 1? What's the worst that can happen if you start Brissett week 1 instead of Drake May? You lose a football game, right? It's like the worst thing that can happen. Now, what's the worst thing that can happen if you start Drake May too early? Think about all the possibilities. And I'm not even focused on injuries. Just think about all the possibilities, right? Maybe his footwork gets messed up. He takes a step back there. Maybe the mechanics get screwed up. He takes a step back there. Maybe he's a little bit scrambled, right? He's not reading his progressions as quickly. He's not trusting his eyes as much. His mind is speeding up. The offensive line is forcing him to run around like a chicken with his head cut off. So that's really why I settle on Brissett to start this season. As of right now on July 24th, I would handicap him to be the guy Because the worst that can happen with Jacoby Brissett starting a football game week 1 or week 2 or week 3 is that you lose. The worst thing that can happen with Drake May is much more significant. So I don't want to handle May with kid gloves. If he's ready and he balls out during camp and he's fantastic at that joint practice and he's great during the preseason and he leapfrogs Brissett, I'm not handling him with kid gloves. As long as the offensive line is not an absolute bleep show, if May is ready, May should start. But Eileen Brissett, I think he's going to end up being the guy that wins this competition coming out of camp. And the Patriots always feel, I said this last night on 98.5, you can bench Brissett without much of an issue, right? You can bench Jacoby Brissett, put Drake May in, and that's kind of just the natural progression of things. If you start May and then have to bench May and play Brissett, it gets a little bit hairy. Not as easy as a situation, right? So quarterback competition, Eileen Brissett starting week 1. I do think Drake May gets on the football field at some point, whether that's early in the season, midway point, late. We'll see how it unfolds, how the team is playing, how Brissett is playing, how Drake May progresses. But that's how I feel right now as we start camp. May versus Brissett is not the only quarterback competition. We'll keep an eye on Joe Milton versus Bailey Zappi. Will Joe Milton get thrown on the practice squad? Would he be able to get to the practice squad? Or would another team pick him up? I would imagine that Joe Milton is more likely to make this roster than Zappi, because we all remember what happened last year. Zappi got cut. Nobody wanted him. And I don't think what Zappi did last year would make any NFL teams jump at the opportunity to grab him off waivers. So if anybody's going to be thrown to the practice squad, the more I think about it, it might be Bailey Zappi and not Joe Milton, because the Patriots, they might be concerned if Milton shows some promise here in camp. They might be concerned that if they throw him out there, he won't make it to the practice squad. Some team will take a swing. They'll put him on the roster. They'll hide him, and they'll keep him. So to me right now, if you want to handicap this thing, I'm looking at Jacoby Brissett, QB1, Drake May, QB2, Joe Milton, QB3. Before I move on to the other positions, especially that offensive line, don't forget to give us that thumbs up. Like the YouTube channel, like this podcast. If you enjoy the podcast, you enjoy the content, support us. Give us that thumbs up. More likes means more eyeballs. We're on Twitter. We're on Facebook. Give us those thumbs up. Like this podcast. Help us out. Like, comment, subscribe, and Spotify, Apple Pods. Don't forget to rate and review. Offensive line. I was recording the podcast yesterday with Greg Bedard, and Greg was actually pretty optimistic about this O-line, which shocked me. As we know, Bedard is more of the wet blanket. We don't believe that Bedard is very optimistic when it comes to all things Patriots. But Bedard, he watches a lot of offensive line play. He pays close attention to the big guys up front. He breaks down the film as much, if not more, than anybody else who covers this team. And Bedard has actually been pretty optimistic about this offensive line. And it all starts with Chuks Okorafor. We talked about this last week, but the idea, if Chuks can work out, the rest of the O-line kind of settles in place, right? You've got Chuks at left tackle, Sidney So at left guard, David Andrews at center, right guard, we'll talk about that, right tackle, we'll talk about that. But most of the offensive line settles in place if you have Chuks playing at least pretty good football at left tackle. So that's the optimistic side, right? That Chuks is out there. They put the pads on. He looks like he's holding his own water, and you feel pretty confident that he's going to be able to play left tackle this year. That would be a fantastic situation for the Patriots. That's the optimistic view, that Chuks is able to hold the water, rest of the line falls in place, and if you've got to help a guy, you can help a guy. You can always help one of the 5 offensive linemen. So that's the optimistic viewpoint. The pessimistic viewpoint is, what if Chuks doesn't work out? If Okorafor doesn't work out at left tackle, now what do? You got to hope that Calvin Anderson can do the job. Or do you look at Caden Wallace? You go back to the idea of transitioning Wallace from the right side to the left side. What does that do with Micah Wenu? Do you now put Mike Onwenu at right tackle if you've got to move Wallace? Or do you put Anderson at right tackle, Wallace at left tackle? Does Vidarian Lowe play any kind of role in all of this conversation? So all of a sudden, just like that, if Chooks doesn't work out at left tackle, you have a lot of questions. If he works at left tackle, you feel pretty good about it. You don't feel great, but you feel pretty good about it. You say to yourself, well, we have a pretty steady offensive line going into week one. So Chooks, he is the most important guy in this offensive line to me. And we had that question. I did the podcast with Taylor Kyles earlier in the week, right? Taylor does great work on CLNS. And we got that question in the mailbag. You know, who's the most important offensive lineman on this team? The person who asked the question thought it was Sidy Sow. I think it's Chooks, because if Chooks works at left tackle, you feel better about things. If he doesn't, now you're trying to piece this together, which is not what you want. Not what you want. The rest of the offensive line, Mike Onwenu. Where is Mike Onwenu going to play? Is he going to play at right guard? Is he going to play at right tackle? He was signed, we were told, as a tackle, of course. And then all of a sudden, when minicamp came about, we found out that he's going to be playing guard. He's going to be playing guard and maybe not right tackle. And that was a change. That was a change in the plan. What happens now during training camp? By the way, Bulldog 9797, what dates are joint practices? August 13th, which happens to be the day after my birthday. So the day after my birthday, we get the joint practice with the Patriots and the Eagles. Tuesday, August 13th. So Mike Onwenu, where does he play? Is he practicing consistently in one spot? Does he look devoted to right guard? Or does he play some right tackle? Is he flipping and flopping? Is he devoted to right tackle? That's one of the most interesting questions about this training camp. You know, how does he perform? Does he go, and somebody says, I'm a Virgo. No, I'm a Leo. How does he perform at right guard? How does he perform at right tackle if they're trying him at both? Or is he devoted to one spot? Now, I think he's going to end up playing right guard. I think he's going to end up being where he's been for the vast majority of his NFL career. And I think that for a number of different reasons. He didn't come in to camp in the greatest shape. He kind of looked like the old school Mike Onwenu, right? Which is more guard size than tackle size. But really, it's Caden Wallace, and it's trying to find your best five guys. And if Chooks works at left tackle, then you can play Wallace at right tackle as long as Wallace looks good, and everything makes sense. Chooks is at left tackle. Sidy Sow is at left guard, where he played at Eastern Michigan. Andrews is your center. Onwenu is back at home at right guard. No questions asked. One of the top 10 guys at that position in football. And then right tackle, you have Caden Wallace, where he played his entire career at Penn State. So everything kind of falls in line. Everybody feels good. Everybody feels comfortable. That's why I lean towards Onwenu playing guard this year. Now, they might have tried to sign him as a tackle. They might have thought that he was going to be a tackle. They might have wanted him to be a tackle. But then you went through the draft. You saw how the board fell. And so now you adjust and you say, let's put our best five out there. And so I think Onwenu right now ends up being guard, which leaves you at right tackle. And you got Caden Wallace, I think, versus Calvin Anderson. Maybe Vidarian Lowe gets involved there. But right tackle to me is going to be between, ultimately, Caden Wallace and Calvin Anderson. Which guy looks better in camp? I think they're going to want Caden Wallace to be the guy because of the draft pick that they invested in him. But I think that's the right tackle battle. So I think Onwenu is going to be mostly at guard and likely ends up being right guard this year. Anderson versus Wallace at right tackle. You hope that Chooks makes it work at left tackle. Sidy Sow, you can have some competition there with Nick Leverett in camp. You drafted Layden Robinson. You know, maybe you have those three guys battle it out. Antonio Mafi looks like he's an absolute non-factor. Jake Andrews is starting on the PUP, so he's pretty much a non-factor. So those are your camp battles on offensive line. It'll be interesting to see what they do at left tackle if Chooks has to sit out for a few reps. Who's going to be that backup left tackle? Is it going to be Lowe? Is it going to be, somebody like Wheatley? What will they do at left tackle? Will they try Calvin Anderson? I mean, I would imagine they hope that Anderson is their swing tackle. Chuk's on the left side, Wallace on the right side. Swing tackle is Anderson. And, you feel pretty decent about that as long as the guys look like they can play those positions. If they don't look like they can play those positions, then you might be in some big-time trouble. But I think that those are the competitions right now. Chuk's versus Anderson, Wallace versus Anderson. You've got Owenu. He's going to be locked in at guard, most likely. David Andrews is locked at center. And Sidy Sow is, for all intents and purposes, locked in at left guard. So tackle positions, we'll see how all of that unfolds. Let's talk wide receiver. Oh, wide receiver, the sexy position in the NFL, right? We know this team doesn't have a wide receiver one. We understand that. We acknowledge it. We embrace it. They don't have a wide receiver one. They don't have that quote-unquote alpha male, right? We get it. So let's look at what they do have. Jalen Polk, big fan. He has the opportunity to be the number one Z with this offense. And I think Polk is going to get a lot of snaps. I think he's going to get a lot of snaps because he plays with high football IQ. He's got great hands. He's a good route runner. He's somebody who you can move around a little bit, right? You can play some inside. He can play some outside. He has that chemistry already beginning with Drake May and company. He's durable. He is, I think, well beyond his years on the field. I expect Polk to get lots of work this training camp. I expect Polk to be your number one Z receiver when the season begins. So who plays X? I think you've got a competition there, right? KJ Osborne will get an opportunity to play the X. Javon Baker, who is healthy, he's on the field, he's practicing. He will get an opportunity to play at the X position. And I think Jalen Reagor will also get a shot. Now, I'd put Jalen Reagor as the third guy in that race, but I do think that Reagor will get an opportunity here. I think he gets a chance because he has legitimate NFL speed. He can stretch the field, which you absolutely need as part of this offense with Alex Van Pelt. They are going to test defenses downfield. Brissett's arm, Drake May's arm, Joe Milton's arm. That's how this offense runs, right? So I think you'll see Reagor get an opportunity because of his speed and also because of his ability to return the football, special teams element. So Reagor gets a shot. Kayshon Boutte in the conversation, 100% in the conversation. I think Kayshon Boutte has a chance to make this team, has an opportunity to try to leapfrog Osborne, Baker, and Reagor. And Kayshon Boutte ended minicamp strongly. Does he continue that strong play going into training camp and into the joint practice? We'll have to wait and see. But I do think Boutte has a chance to make this team when you look at the X. So Osborne, Wallace, Anderson, Osborne, Baker, Reagor as the X. And to go along with Kayshon Boutte, you've got four guys battling for that spot. The Pop situation. We know the Pop situation. He's playing slot. Your slot guy's locked down. That's it. Pop Douglas, Demario Douglas, playing the slot, no doubt, hands down. He'll also be somewhat of a gadget guy, but Pop is there. Jalen Polk and Pop Douglas are the two guys that I think have their positions pretty much solidified. Polk at the Z and Pop in the slot. You got to find that X. What about Kendrick Bourne? I think Kendrick Bourne, as he is right now on the PUP, I've been saying this throughout the offseason. I would not be surprised whatsoever if Kendrick Bourne is on the PUP to begin the year. I would not be surprised if Bourne misses the first several weeks of the season. So I don't think we factor him in just yet. I have Bourne on the outside looking in on the pup. We'll see how he does physically. If he's able to get back onto the football field sooner rather than later, then we address it. But I think Bourne stays on the pup for a while. What about Juju? I think Juju ends up getting traded or ends up being cut. Dependent on who's on the team, right? If Kendrick Bourne starts the year on pup, if Tyquan Thornton's a disaster, if Javon Baker doesn't look like he's ready, if KJ Osborne continues to drop footballs, Juju has a chance to make this team. But I don't think it's likely. When I was at minicamp, maybe he was just playing it slow, but he still looked like he was cooked. He still looked like he was washed. Maybe he surprises us. But I think he is absolutely on the bubble, and it's going to be dependent on what these other guys do. The Tyquan Thorntons, the Ragers, the Bakers, the Booties, what do those guys do? If they don't show up consistently, Juju has a chance. But I don't think it's very likely he's on this roster. And I also don't think it's very likely that Tyquan Thornton's on this roster. Don't forget, like, comment, subscribe, rate, and review to this podcast every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday live at 11 a.m. right here on YouTube. We do the damn thing. Nick Cattle Show covering the Patriots. Let's go to tight end. Tight end's pretty simple. Hunter Henry's your number one, no doubt. I think Austin Hooper's your number two. His knowledge of the system. He's worked with AVP before. He gets it. He can do some blocking as well. So I think it's Henry, Hooper, 1, 2. Then you get to tight end 3, and it gets interesting. LaMichael Petway made some plays at minicamp. Is he going to try to force the Patriots to make a decision about his spot on this roster and say, you know what, we've got Jaheim Bell. We drafted Jaheim Bell, but this guy LaMichael Petway is looking pretty damn good right now. He did have flashes at minicamp, so let's keep an eye on Petway. As far as Jaheim Bell, I've called him this a few times during this offseason and early minicamp season. Jaheim Bell, to me, could be a secret weapon with this offense. I did a podcast on the Patreon page that I have going back several weeks ago, and I broke down, this was like 2 months ago, I broke down Jaheim Bell and what he did at each college stop. And his versatility, his ability to get yards after the catch, his ability to play out of the flat, his snaps that he took at running back. He played in the backfield, especially before he got to Florida State. He did some of those things. His versatility and his strengths align, I think, great with Alex Van Pelt and what this offense is going to want to do. With tight ends, you throw them out into the flat, and you allow them to get yacked downfield. You love throwing it down the seam. When you think about Drake May, when Drake May gets into the game eventually, when he starts to play, Drake May loves throwing the football in the middle of the field, loves attacking down the seam. Bell is a perfect fit with May. So is Jaheim Bell going to have 6 catches a game? No, he's not. But I'm telling you, watch out for Jaheim Bell, because if he gets through this camp healthy, he's on this roster, he's that guy that can get you 2 or 3 catches and pop a big play. He's one of those guys that misdirection handoff, right? Misdirection play action into the bootleg, little drop off to Bell, and he runs 35 yards for a big time play in a big moment. I think Bell has the potential to be a secret weapon for this offense with his athleticism and his versatility. So watch out for Jaheim Bell. I like his fit. All right, we wrap up with running back before we get to our bigger offensive questions. Ramondre Stevenson, obviously, number one. No doubt, hands down, he's the guy. But Ramondre has to be a beast. He has to be a beast this year. He's got to play a big percentage, easy for me to say, percentage of the snaps. He's got to play those snaps. He's got to look like he looked later in the season last year. This offense can't afford Stevenson to get off to a slow start like he did a year ago. Now, that might have been all about injury. We don't know. But Stevenson looks thinner. He looks like he's in better shape. He got his contract extension, so he best be happy. So Stevenson has to be a beast for this offense. And we've heard about Alex Van Pelt. He loves to run the football. The Browns ran the football a ton. You look at their pass rate versus other teams. I mean, they're just going to run the football. And so if you want this offense to work, you've got to get Stevenson going early and often. He's got to be really good for this offense to reach its potential. A lot of what Van Pelt is going to do is going to come off of the run, whether it's running in the early downs and you're talking down and distance, or you're talking about the play action bootleg game, the misdirection game that they run an awful lot. They did a lot of that in Cleveland. Stevenson's ability to get through tackles, punish defenders, pick up yards when he shouldn't pick up yards, the yards after the contact, His ability on first and second down will make it much easier on this offense to run efficiently and to run effectively. They need Stevenson to be as good as he possibly can be. If you think he's a top 7 or 8 back in the league, he best show that this year. Because when you look behind Stevenson, they are a little thin. I love the Antonio Gibson signing. I'm excited for Gibson. He's your pass-catching running back. He's the guy that they haven't had the last couple of years. He's also a big play guy. He can play all over the place. You can line him up outside on the line of scrimmage. You can line him up in the slot. You can line him up in the backfield. Antonio Gibson, incredibly versatile when it comes to the passing game. I think it's a very good signing. Gerard Mayo said today, by the way, to the media, not to be worried about Gibson. It is not going to be a long-term issue. He is on the non-football injury list. Mayo called it procedural. So I think you'll have Gibson out there pretty soon. And I really, really like the signing of Antonio Gibson. I think he gives this offense some explosivity that they did not have on third down. So I like the combination of Stevenson and Gibson, but beyond that, you've got some questions. Kevin Harris, is he going to be able to hang on to a roster spot? Somebody we watch out for is Deshaun Fenwick. He was not out there with minicamp. I think he had some kind of an injury issue, might have been a hamstring. But if Deshaun Fenwick is out there and he's practicing during this training camp, and he should be, he was not put on the PUP, he was not on the NFI. So if Fenwick is out there, watch for Deshaun Fenwick. He might steal the third running back spot on this team. So Fenwick could be important. Stevenson, Gibson, and then who? Do the Patriots possibly go out and try to get a veteran running back for that RB3 spot? I think they're going to try Fenwick and see how he works out. I think they're going to see if Harris can get the job done as the number 3 guy. But that's your running back room. All right, overarching questions coming up in a minute. I want to get to some bigger questions about this offense as camp starts just 32 minutes ago. But before I get to the overarching questions, I want to talk about my Patreon for a minute. Spare me a few seconds, okay? Now, people sign up for all different reasons at Patreon, whether it's community chats, whether it's the mailbag audio pods that we do. We do exclusive podcasts. If you like how I cover the Patriots, we talk about the Celtics, the Bruins, the Red Sox on that Patreon page. I have a different podcast called Off the Cuff, which is more of looking at national storylines as far as sports go, some pop culture, some personal life, some radio stuff mixed in, radio opinions, Off the Cuff podcast. And also, if you watch this pod consistently and you get a little bit tired of the ads, the Patreon page, ad-free podcasts. So if you don't enjoy all of that I just mentioned, and you don't want to join for the content itself, some people just join to contribute to me financially, to support the program, to support me, and it's $5 a month. $5 a month, $1.25 a week, Patreon page. It is patreon.com/Nick Cattles, Cattles. Check it out if you're interested. All right, some overarching offensive questions. Let's start here. Let's start with the offensive coordinator. Can Alex Van Pelt do the job? Can he do the job? Now, he has been offensive coordinator once in his NFL career, and I'm talking about for the full season. It was his job, and that was as a play caller with the Buffalo Bills back in 2009. The 2009 Bills, that offensive roster was not very good. And if you remember, AVP wasn't supposed to be the OC in 2009 for the Bills. That was thrown onto his lap like a week before the year kicked off, literally. So I don't think you can look at 2009 and judge Van Pelt as an offensive coordinator off of what that team did that year, given the lack of talent and given the circumstances that he had to deal with, that it was just sprung on him in the last second. Now, I am somewhat optimistic about Van Pelt. He's an experienced guy, right? He played quarterback in the league. He's been an offensive coordinator. He's done everything on the offensive side of the ball outside of being a consistent play caller. He called some games for the Browns, Stefanski, when he was sick. And again, back in 2009, he called the plays for the Bills. Outside of the play calling stuff, he's done everything. Game planning, install, working with the scheme. He is very respected as a quarterback's coach. I think he's a smart guy, So I'm optimistic about Van Pelt. And I'm also optimistic about this scheme because we've seen this kind of scheme work in a bunch of different places across the league. Whether it's a veteran coach calling the plays or a newbie coach calling the plays, this kind of West Coast branch system has worked out tremendously for a number of different coaches. So I really like the scheme change. I like Van Pelt's experience. And I also think Ben McAdoo is going to help. And if you're new to this program, if you're new to this podcast, I did a podcast months ago, months and months ago, when Ben McAdoo was reportedly joining this football team. I did a podcast on McAdoo. And I think the perception of McAdoo is not the reality of McAdoo. You can go out and check that podcast I did months ago. It is, archived on this YouTube page. But I think McAdoo has been disrespected because people remember the greasy, slicked back hair, and he wasn't a good head coach. As an OC, he's done a pretty damn good job in this league. So with McAdoo kind of overlooking the offensive operation, I feel pretty decent about it. How does the development of Drake May go? Huge question, right? Huge question. How does Drake May develop? Now, through minicamp, it looked like he was progressing, and we talked about it at the time. By the way, Andrew Callahan tweeted out Judon and Godchaux was more hands-on during positional drills than they saw him in minicamp and OTAs. He does not look like a hold-in so far. So Godchaux was out there. He's doing the work, which somewhat surprises me. So the development of May, how does it go? Does he continue to steadily progress? We saw it through minicamp. We talked about it during minicamp. I think minicamp went as well as you could have hoped for Drake May if you're a Patriots fan, as far as how he looked and the improvements that we saw. The footwork looked better, all of those things. So how does the development of May go over the next month and a half, 2 months? If he continues to progress, if Drake May continues to get better, then we go back to what we mentioned earlier in the podcast. If he starts to light a little bit of a fire, right? If he starts to cook a little bit out there on the field and the footwork is there and the team is excited, that's how he ends up leapfrogging Brissett if he does. But it's all going to start with the small stuff, and we all have to see him continue to improve with those little things before we start to think about him being QB1 when the season kicks off. So how does that development go? And does he trust his surroundings, the offensive line, the skill position players? How's the chemistry going? His understanding of the offense, the verbiage, is the communication going well? Is he getting the guys in and out of the huddle quickly? All of that stuff. Huge for this camp. How much will the Patriots tinker with the offensive line? I told you about how I think it's going to go. I think it'll end up being Chooks left tackle, Sidy Sow left guard, Andrews center, Owenu right guard, Caden Wallace right tackle. But how much do the Patriots mess around with that O-line? How much does the O-line flippity-floppity, right? Are we going to see Caden Wallace at left tackle at all? Are we going to see Owenu at right tackle at all? What's going to be happening with Chooks? So how much do they tinker? How much do they mess around with what is up front? Are they rotating some guys, or do they have a clear idea where they want to start? And where they want to start, they'll let that thing kind of brew for a little bit and then see what they have and then maybe start to tinker. So how much will they mess around with that O-line? And when do they settle on a top 5? When do you make that decision? Is it at joint practices on August 13th against the Eagles? At that point, when you get ready for the preseason, is that when you settle on your top 5 offensive linemen? Or are you going to settle rather early? Do you see enough and say, case closed, this is what we're rolling with, because we want to make sure these guys are all on the same page? Scott Peters, Robert Kugler, the 2 offensive line coaches, they're doing their work. They feel good about these 5. We're just going to roll with these 5. So when do they make that decision? Is it constant shuffling? Is there chaos? Is there confusion? We got to wait until the season kicks off to find out who's going to start in that offensive line? Is it like last year when it felt like there were 75 changes for the first 5 or 6 weeks of the season? How are they going to handle this O-line from the get-go? Do they have a 5 in mind, and how much time do they give that 5 to solidify themselves up front? Can Javon Baker surprise people and take the X position job? I mean, I just think about the idea of Polk and Baker. Imagine if they're both, if they are both ready to be NFL wide receivers. And I'm not talking about catching 80 passes. I'm not talking about, going Puka Nacua on us. But imagine if Polk and Baker are both ready to contribute day one. I feel good about Polk. I think he's going to be that guy. Baker, I don't know. I loved the pick, but he was injured through minicamp. He had the, social media stuff. Mayo saying now he's going to go out there and back it up. There are some questions, the red flag, quote unquote, stuff from Bedard going back a couple of months ago. So is Baker going to be dependable? Is he going to contribute right away? Because if you tell me that Polk and Baker are ready to contribute right away, my freaking goodness. I mean, that would be huge for this football team. If your 2 young receivers are ready, if you have Baker at the X and Polk at the Z and they are ready to contribute right away, that would be huge. I'm not anticipating it for both guys to be ready to go out there and just day one make a difference. I'm not going to set myself up to be disappointed. Is it possible? Absolutely possible. I think Baker's a very talented young man. And I love Jalen Polk. So I think it's possible. I wouldn't say it's likely. But imagine if both of those guys hit. Like, comment, subscribe, rate, and review if you're digging this podcast. If you have a question, if you have a thought, you can throw it in the super chat right now, and I will get to it before I say goodbye. So don't forget to send those super chats if you want to contribute financially to the program or jump to the front of the line. You can do that with the super chat. Like, comment, subscribe. That costs you nothing. 0. Liking, commenting, subscribing, all you're doing is helping. Take a second of your time to do that. Rate and review Spotify, Apple Pods. What does this offense look like if Ramondre Stevenson doesn't have a top-tier rushing season? That's a question I keep asking myself over the last few days. What does this offense look like if Stevenson doesn't show up and look like a top 10 running back? What does it look like? I think he's so critical to this operation this year. So critical. If you don't have that run game and you're behind the sticks, you're putting pressure on Brissett or May, you're putting pressure on the offensive line. It's tougher for the receivers to make plays when you're looking at 3rd and 8 than it is on 3rd and 3. It limits the playbook for Alex Van Pelt. If Stevenson is churning out yards consistently, if he looks like that dude, then you're talking, I don't know what, 2nd and 6, 2nd and 5, 3rd and short, 3rd and 3. That's where you want to be with this offense. If Stevenson gets going, it opens up everything. It opens up the bootlegs. It opens up the play action. It opens up the misdirection. It opens up the shots down the field. It opens up everything for Alex Van Pelt. But if you don't have Stevenson running like he's capable of running, now you've got Antonio Gibson, Kevin Harris, and Deshaun Fenwick. Gibson has his fumbling issues. I like him more as the 3rd down back, right? Catch the football and get going downfield. If Stevenson isn't the guy, if he's not looking like that dude, that will hurt this offense significantly. I think people are underrating the importance of Ramondre Stevenson. He has to be damn good. He will take the pressure off of the quarterback. He'll take the pressure off the rest of this offense, the skill positions, and he will inevitably help the offensive line with the yards after the catch, yards after contact, all those things that he can do. But if you have Stevenson looking like the first 6 or 7 weeks of 2023, no bueno. No bueno at all. Like, comment, subscribe, rate, and review. I appreciate every single one of you for joining me during this podcast. Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 11 a.m. sharp, Nick Cattle Show. Have a great rest of your Wednesday. I'll talk to you on Friday morning at 11 a.m. Thank you, and I appreciate you.